I didn't ruin my life by making the wrong choices. I ruined it by making the right ones every single time. That's the part no one warns you about. Everyone talks about regret as if it only follows failure. Bad decisions. Obvious mistakes. But some of the most destructive choices are the ones everyone agrees with. The ones that make sense. The ones you get praised for. I built my life carefully. Thoughtfully. Responsibly. Every step forward was justified. Every door I walked through was one I was supposed to choose. From the outside, it looked like success. From the inside, it felt like a slow, quiet suffocation. I remember the first time I ignored myself. It felt small. Insignificant. A simple trade, what I wanted versus what was reasonable. I chose reasonable. That felt mature. Noble, even. I told myself I could always return to what I wanted later. Later became a habit. Each time the choice appeared again, it got easier to silence that internal resistance. I learned to explain it away. Stability matters. Security matters. People depend on you. Desire is a luxury. I didn't feel like I was betraying myself, I felt like I was growing up. No one noticed the cost because it was invisible. There was no breakdown. No crisis. Just a gradual dimming. Like turning down the volume so slowly you don't realize when the music is gone. My days became efficient. Productive. Predictable. I knew exactly what each morning would require of me. That predictability was comforting until it wasn't. At some point, comfort turned into containment, and I didn't know where one ended and the other began. People told me I was doing well. I agreed. Not because it was true, but because it was easier than explaining a dissatisfaction that had no clear cause. How do you admit that everything is fine, yet something feels fundamentally wrong? I started to notice the absence before I understood it. I stopped feeling anticipation. Not dread anticipation. The future felt flat. Manageable. Already decided. When I imagined the next 5, 10 years, I didn't see disaster. I saw repetition. That terrified me more than failure ever had. The hardest truth to accept was this: no one had trapped me. I had chosen this life freely, willingly, repeatedly. And because of that, I felt I had no right to complain. Gratitude became a cage. Responsibility became a reason to stay silent. I learned how to perform contentment convincingly. I smiled at the right moments. I said the right things. I reassured people and myself that this was what adulthood looked like. Somewhere along the way, I stopped asking whether I was happy and focused instead on whether I was stable. Stability is seductive. It doesn't demand courage. It rewards consistency. It makes your life legible to others. But it also asks for something in return: your willingness to stay the same. The first crack appeared when I realized I had become emotionally efficient. I reacted less. Felt less. Wanted less, not because I was at peace, but because wanting had become inconvenient. Desire complicates things. It introduces risk. It asks questions stability doesn't want to answer. I began to envy people who made reckless choices. Not because I wanted chaos, but because they were visibly alive. Their mistakes had texture. Their joy had weight. My life felt smooth and hollow. At night, when everything was quiet, I felt a pressure in my chest that I couldn't name. Not sadness. Not anxiety. Something closer to mourning. As if I were grieving a person who hadn't died, only been postponed indefinitely. I tried to rationalize it. Everyone sacrifices something. Life is compromise. You can't have everything. All true. And all insufficient. The dark realization came slowly, then all at once: I had optimized my life for approval, not truth. I had chosen what would look good in retrospect instead of what felt right in the present. I was living a life that would be easy to explain and impossible to inhabit fully. And the worst part, it was working. Nothing was forcing me to change. Nothing was falling apart. There was no emergency to justify disruption. Just a growing awareness that if I continued like this, I would wake up one day and realize my life had ended without ever really beginning. I didn't know what to do with that awareness yet. I only knew that the right life I had chosen so carefully was slowly erasing me politely, efficiently, without leaving a mess. And I was running out of excuses to pretend that was okay. The moral dilemma didn't announce itself loudly. It crept in quietly, disguised as a question I couldn't shake. How much of myself was I allowed to lose in the name of doing the right thing? Once that question existed, everything felt unstable. The life I had built no longer felt solid, it felt conditional. Like a structure held together by my constant cooperation. As long as I kept agreeing, it stood. The moment I stopped, it would crack. That realization frightened me more than I expected. I had always believed that choosing the right life would eventually bring peace. That one day I would wake up and feel grateful for my discipline, my restraint, my sacrifices. Instead, I felt like a caretaker of a life that wasn't mine. Responsible for it, loyal to it, and completely disconnected from it. I began to notice how often I used the word should when I thought about my future. I should stay. I should be grateful. I should not want more. Those thoughts didn't feel moral, they felt coercive. As if I were enforcing rules that no longer served any living purpose. The pressure intensified when people started talking about permanence. Long-term plans. Forever decisions. Commitments that assumed I would continue being the same person indefinitely. Each of those conversations landed like a quiet threat. Not because they were unreasonable, but because they asked me to promise something I no longer believed in. I tried to imagine myself 10 years from now, having stayed. Not catastrophically unhappy. Just, reduced. Older. More efficient. Better at managing disappointment. I saw a version of myself who could explain their life perfectly and feel nothing while doing it. That image haunted me. I told myself I was being dramatic. Plenty of people live good lives without fireworks. Meaning doesn't require intensity. Calm is underrated. All true. But none of those thoughts addressed the real issue. I wasn't choosing calm, I was choosing avoidance. The ethical conflict sharpened. Leaving would hurt people who had done nothing wrong. Staying would continue hurting someone. Everyone ignored me. I couldn't frame myself as the victim without feeling manipulative. I couldn't frame myself as the villain without feeling dishonest. There was no clean narrative. That's when I understood something painful. Morality becomes complicated when the harm is invisible. No one would see what staying cost me. No one would validate that loss. From the outside, it would look like ingratitude, instability, self-sabotage. And I had lived long enough under approval to know how heavy that judgment could be. I began negotiating with myself again. What if I changed internally but stayed externally? What if I found fulfillment on the side, quietly, without disrupting anything? What if I learned to want less, need less, expect less? Those bargains were familiar, comfortable, and empty. They were the same strategies that had brought me here. The turning point didn't come from courage. It came from exhaustion. The exhaustion of constantly editing myself. Of filtering every impulse through responsibility before allowing it to exist. Of being a reliable version of someone I no longer recognized. One night, I caught myself thinking something that scared me with its clarity. If this is the life I'm protecting so carefully, why does it require me to disappear to sustain it? That question changed everything. Because suddenly, staying no longer felt virtuous. It felt dishonest. And leaving no longer felt reckless, it felt necessary. Still, I didn't act. Not immediately. Awareness doesn't equal action. Sometimes it just deepens the pain. I began to feel restless in ways I couldn't hide anymore. Silence became uncomfortable. Agreement felt heavy. I hesitated mid-sentence, aware of the gap between what I was saying and what I meant. That hesitation was noticed. People asked if something was wrong. I said no. But the truth was, something had already broken quietly, internally. The illusion that I could keep living this way without consequence. The right life had given me safety, structure, approval. What it couldn't give me anymore was consent. I was participating out of obligation, not belief. And that realization made every day feel like borrowed time. I understood then that there was no neutral option left. Continuing was a choice. Leaving would be a choice. One preserved order, the other preserved integrity. I didn't yet know which one I would choose. But I knew this: once you see the cost of doing the right thing, you can't unknow it. And eventually, you have to decide whether being right matters more than being real. The choice didn't arrive as a dramatic moment. There was no surge of courage, no cinematic clarity. What arrived instead was a quiet, irreversible understanding: I could not unknow what I now knew. Once that happened, the right life stopped feeling stable. It felt temporary. Like a structure built on my continued silence. And silence, I realized, had become an active form of consent to my own erasure. I tried, one last time, to imagine staying. Not abstractly. Not philosophically. I imagined the texture of it. The mornings. The conversations. The years folding into each other. I imagined myself becoming better at managing disappointment, better at explaining away longing, better at surviving without asking questions. I imagined myself being admired. And I felt something close to panic. That was the moment I understood that I wasn't afraid of leaving. I was afraid of staying long enough to stop caring. The right life had taught me discipline, restraint, responsibility. It had also taught me how easy it is to confuse endurance with virtue. How simple it is to call self-denial maturity when it's praised by everyone around you. I had built a life that made sense to everyone except the person living it. Leaving didn't mean destroying everything. That was another lie I had used to delay the decision. In reality, it meant disappointing people. Creating uncertainty. Letting go of roles I had performed well. It meant being misunderstood. And for the first time, that felt like a price I was willing to pay. I didn't announce anything. I didn't explain myself perfectly. I stopped trying to justify my needs in language that would make them acceptable. I spoke less carefully. I chose more honestly. I allowed myself to be seen as inconsistent, selfish, confused. Those labels scared me less than disappearing had. The fallout wasn't immediate, but it was real. Some people didn't understand. Some relationships shifted. Some expectations collapsed under the weight of my refusal to keep carrying them. That hurt more than I expected and less than I feared. What surprised me most was how little the world punished me for choosing myself. The real consequences were internal. Guilt surfaced. Doubt followed. There were nights when I wondered if I had made a mistake, if I had thrown away something good in pursuit of something undefined. There were moments when the comfort of the old life tempted me like a memory of warmth. But even in those moments, I noticed something crucial: I was present. I felt the doubt instead of avoiding it. I felt the fear instead of negotiating it down. I felt regret, excitement, grief, hope, sometimes all at once. The emotional spectrum I had flattened for years began to return, uneven and overwhelming. It wasn't happiness. It was aliveness. I began to understand that the right life hadn't been wrong. It just wasn't finished. It was a chapter I had mistaken for the whole story because it was neat, coherent, defensible. But life isn't meant to be defended like a thesis. It's meant to be lived like a question. And I had finally allowed myself to ask it. If you're listening to this and you feel trapped by a life that looks good from the outside but feels empty on the inside, hear this clearly: you are not broken for wanting more. You are not immature for questioning stability. And you are not selfish for refusing to disappear quietly. Sometimes the most dangerous choice is the one everyone agrees with. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is disappoint the version of yourself that learned to survive instead of live. I didn't find a perfect life on the other side of that decision. I found uncertainty. Responsibility of a different kind. A need to choose again and again without guarantees. But I also found something I had been missing for a long time: consent. Consent to my own life. Consent to my own presence. Consent to becoming, rather than maintaining. I chose the right life, and it almost destroyed me. Choosing myself didn't save me. It returned me.